The overwhelming experience of being a caregiver can keep people stuck, unable to really make changes to situations, relationships, beliefs, and emotions. So where do caregivers start in order to get unstuck, Kay?
Yeah. Well, I think probably the most important thing to do is to find somebody to talk to. Don't be isolated. It's a vicious cycle. We think that we're doing something wrong if caregiving is hard, or if we have some really, really hard emotions like resentment or frustration or anger at the person we're caring for. And our first instinct really as caregivers, and I mean, I'm saying me because I get this. I know how this works. It's happened to me, is we want to hide that from people. And what happens then is we get isolated. And then you get more isolated, and it's extremely unhealthy to try to deal with those things in isolation. And so if you are stuck, I know I keep saying get help, but that really can be from a community of people you trust, maybe a support group that you're in. If you have a therapist or a counselor or a coach, maybe you just start by talking to your primary care physician. Mm-hmm. They may or may not be super helpful. I mean, it depends on the physician, but the idea here is to train yourself to start asking for help. That's so difficult for most of us. That is the number one way to get unstuck, is to find somebody to talk to, and then go from there. What I have learned is that if you try to manage it on your own, nothing is going to change. The overwhelm, the stress, the overload, if you try to continue to do all of that alone, it's just not going to get any better. People tell me all the time, but I don't have anybody to turn to. And I want to tell you that I believe you. Now, I also know better. I know that there are people that you can turn to. You're not used to doing it. It's not a habit that you have. And so that's why I say start with somebody easy, like maybe your doctor or somebody at church, or, a friend that you can talk to. Reach out to get help from NAMI if you need to, NAMI.org. They have a free crisis text line. I'll give you the number for that too. And you can put it in the show notes. There are lots of places you can get help. If the primary thought that you're carrying around in your head is, but I'm alone and there's nobody to help me, that will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have to learn to see that and recognize that and say, that thought itself is holding me back. I need to get some help.
I would imagine the last 2+ years with COVID that this is even more elevated. Would you think that? And working with the clients that you help in dealing with a lot of these feelings and boundaries and feeling that a sense of being stuck, do you think it's been worse in COVID for caregivers?
I do think it's worse because I think a lot of, I'll say, systems and organizations have used it as an excuse to say, well, we just can't help you right now. And if you hear that enough from people, you really do start to take that in, and you start to think, well, everybody's just going to tell me that they can't help me, that there's no help available, that there's no funding for that, whatever. And so we have to learn to be really assertive and say, really? Are you sure you can't help me? Are you sure there's nothing available? Because it has become a knee-jerk reaction for these big organizations to say, well, there's nothing we can do. And if we learn to say, hang on a second, is that really true? Is there really nothing you can do? That's the way that we will, learn to get help from some of those big systems again, teach them to help us again, but then also kind of make it like our knee-jerk reaction to say, except I need help. And so I really need you to get on helping me figure this out.
I feel like we have so many resources now available and virtually, I think now more than ever because of COVID. I think so many systems that I'm familiar with, they're offering services virtually that they weren't doing before. But we have to look for it, right? Caregivers and people have to look for that help and can't just sit back and, woe is me. You can improve. You can get unstuck. You can be empowered, but you have to ask for it.
You have to ask for it because if on your own you've gotten to a place where you're that overloaded and that overwhelmed, and look, I have been there. If you got yourself into that, the chances that you'll be able to get yourself out of that are pretty small because your nervous system is kind of already overwhelmed. And so, reach out and get some help. And I'm going to tell you, start literally anywhere. And if you reach out to somebody and they tell you no, or some people have made fun of me or told me I should be ashamed of myself for asking for help, deal with the pain of that. That really sucks. And then move on. Don't let yourself be isolated. Please don't let anyone tell you that old line, well, I guess that's just the way it is for you now. I guess that's just your lot in life because of what you have going on. I am here to tell you, no, that is so unhealthy. So don't let anybody try to convince you of that. You can always say, no, thank you. And you can walk away from that conversation.